hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your dreaded DM, DBJ, and glad you could come along. Now, this week, we are talking about pandemics. For those who are new, we take a subject. We're talking about pandemics. We take it and we talk about that subject all week long. And each day, we have a different theme. And this on Thursday is Third Pillar Thursday. Yes, the third pillar of exploration. We're also talking about tabletop RPGs. And the third pillar of exploration deals with the environment and deals with, well, exploration, with the first and second pillars corresponding to combat and social interactions thereof. And for those who are brand new to the show is simulcast on Twitch, YouTube, and our Discord server. Join our Discord server, slide down to the boiler room, and that's where all the cool kids get to hang out. Now, so pandemics and exploration. Now, I take exploration even just a little bit further, but let's start with some generalities. Now, when it comes to pandemics, you have to have a place to go where there's lots of danger and you need some safe havens. And the great thing, well, as concerns tabletop RPGs and adventure, the great thing about pandemics is mixing the idea of a modern or comfortable society destroyed, and now you're flipping it on its head, right? So in a modern context, it's the idea of, oh, there's a big city with shiny skyscrapers, and then you go to this giant big city and there's, I don't know, a giant plane sticking out of one of those skyscrapers, or there are highways that are completely empty, filled with nothing but abandoned cars. It's the local mall that's completely empty, and the sporting goods store just happens to, for some reason, no one broke into the sporting goods store to steal anything, and there's something there. It's this it's the destruction of civilized society and exploring those regions. And so a pandemic, like most apocalyptic events, allows you to do your classic dungeon crawls in areas where you normally wouldn't have one, because it would be filled with the normal human population. Acoustic acoustic solution. Thank you for coming back. I actually thought this wasn't your thing, as you made a reference about video games, but I'm glad I could help with some tabletop RPGs. Welcome everyone. For those, again, if you're on Twitch or YouTube, you may not be seeing the other individuals and, of course, our Discord server, but you are all joining in, and maybe, just maybe, I won't be able to get to every comment, but your comment may be a highlight of the show. So, on this Third Pillar Thursday, love talking about the environment. And sometimes, I've even heard this before, that in post-apocalyptic settings of sorts, some game masters have a hard time coming up with new and original locations for things to happen, rather than the typical abandoned, fill in the blank, abandoned house, abandoned barn, abandoned, building or something, and trying to come up with new ideas. And one trick is to imagine a location where the events of normal human society have been half filled. So in other words, like, people have left in the middle of them eating their food or performing their jobs or something, and then it left everything there. So you can get things where there's spilling water or something on fire, or chemicals being released, just having some kind of you could create some kind of hazards where you could smell gas or something being released. Now, I understand normally we refer to, say, Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy gaming and post-apocalyptic style of description still work here when it comes to recently abandoned keeps, castles, villages, towns, cities, states, and things of that nature. Especially when you include things like wandering, animals that are wandering around, or a food that's rotting, or drawbridges that are half down, or walls that have collapsed, or a random wooden structure burning in the background for no good reason because someone dropped a candle or a torch or something, or a lantern, and including those elements. Now, something else that we've talked about on this channel before, and for those who are new, don't really may not be used to hearing this talked about, but one great, really dynamic thing to add into your environment, and when I say add to an environment, I mean mechanically speaking as well, are people. Large groups of people, mobs, crazy mobs, angry mobs, fearful mobs, catatonic mobs. Groups of people are great physical, environmental encounters because a mob almost becomes its own creature, right? It ends up having its own personality. It emblematic of something quite separate from the individuals that are in it. Uh, dead man would agree that with me that during our current state of affairs, although a lot of it has kind of calmed down quite a bit, hopefully anyway, but we'll agree that mobs today expressing themselves in various manners are a hazard unlike other kinds of things going on. Yeah, Rickard says, can catatonic people really form a mob? They can get in your way. They become strange carpets after a while. No, I think so. I think people wandering around in a daze could be. I don't know if you could call them a mob. I agree. You might not call them a mob, but they could be in your way when you're trying to do things, right? They become meat shields and barriers for you to get someplace while you try to push through people who are, I don't know, they are catatonic due to being stressed, or maybe they are diseased. They're two steps away from the zombie infection because of because of the pandemic that we've been talking about all week, right? Yeah, Rickard's like, so catatonic mob equals difficult terrain. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 Not just difficult terrain, but maybe like half cover or like three-quarters cover as well. Applying to, and this is where I like to pick the rules out, and I love the fact that you can use and abuse the environment. So let's say you have one of those like shell shocked, stress out mobs. There's maybe, let's say there's like 60, 70 people, and something has happened that they're calling out for their loved ones. They don't know where they're going. Maybe they're like choking on smoke and wandering around the city, and the player characters need to get from point A to point B, and they're being chased, or maybe they're chasing some kind of enemy or something, and the enemy runs into that crowd. Well, would that enemy get like both be slowed down due to difficult terrain plus have half cover? Sure. And then when the player characters run into that same crowd and they are each trying to track each other or fire, ranged weapons at each other or spell-like effects at each other, would they both be slowed and get the half cover? I'd say yes. Now, again, going into the meat shield problem, well, not really a problem. It could be a benefit. Firing those magic missiles through the crowd. Well, the magic missiles wouldn't hit anybody. Some kind of like burning hands through the crowd. Maybe the crowd might not be there long enough for you to gain the benefits over a long period of time. But why the hell not, right? And I just feel that like a dynamic environment, including the people themselves, really works. I mean, in a pandemic when okay, let's be topical today, right? People, an angry mob sometimes can be quite formless, meaning like they're just expressing an anger at the closest thing available. And so that closest thing might be the player characters themselves as they throw rotted fruit and random bricks and broken stabs, and someone in the crowd yells at one of the player characters like, there they are, or some other thing at the top of their lungs that no one particularly understands, except that the player characters know that they're in trouble, right? And a mob could be very, very easily um, reconstituted as like a creature that takes up space in a particular zone that's got so many hit points, and just use it as not just difficult terrain, but even like you've got to make a strength check to move through the crowd because you're violently trying to pass through them. And the same thing works for like festivals and public speaking. Maybe people are listening to like nobles or political leaders, or they're there to see entertainment or something like that. Same thing. Yep, swarm rules, absolutely. And collectively, the hit points, you know, Dungeons and Dragons here, the hit points might not even be very high, right? Um, a barbarian that swings their axe in a large crowd of people, of 30 or 40 people, swing the axe and kill like 4 or 5 of them, and people are going to run for cover, right? That's a thing as well. Whereas maybe the barbarian doesn't want that to happen because now they don't have the benefit of being in half cover and being surrounded by meat shields. And so playing with the idea of a crowd is a thing. Now, remember, since we're talking about pandemics, because we've talked about crowds before in the channel, you also may not want to be in a crowd of people that are sick. If the players have run into the proverbial lepers colony and the people there are starving and they want help and they think that you are they're holding on to this thread of hope, and they see healthy, powerful adventurers, running through their community, and they may start, surrounding the player characters, begging for food or safety, or please help me, or beg to the gods to give us, forgiveness, or whatever the case may be. They might be a crowd, but they might be innocent as well. Put the player characters in a moral quandary, right? Some player characters could care less and go, whatever, can I swing my axe at them? Like, sure, you can kill the innocent people if you want to. Or, some other player characters might be less inclined to physically and forcibly push their way through or violently harm that group, but maybe they use their charisma to convince the people to move aside, but maybe become a barrier for whatever thing or people that are chasing the PCs, as well as the fact of, I don't know, getting sick in a pandemic, right? Those individuals that are, have those barely wrapped pus-filled bumps and, uh, vomitous projectiles that are coming out of their mouths and other orifices, you might not want to push through that crowd as well. So they might be a plague carrier. Yep. Rickard says, what? You don't want to hug the zombie plague carrying humans? You monster. And being sarcastic. And I get it, right? You might want to keep them away with a literal 10-foot pole because they might be trying to get you sick. Yep. Yep. And like Dead Man says, yeah, or worse yet, looks at the character. Meat. Brains. I don't Brains really wasn't a zombie thing for a lot of movies. I think that just caught on through like maybe 1 or 2 zombie movies. Normally zombie movies are generally like, just let's just eat the flesh, but there was one eating brains. Yeah, eat the meat. It's the meat walking, or as it's been proved, as it's been talked about before, we are our biological pilots piloting human-sized mecha with our brains floating around inside of the pilot chambers. But so along with people also do things where they can affect the environment, making it dynamic and tough for player characters themselves. So the villagers that throw a flaming torch into a wagon and then flip that wagon over, blocking a player character's path of travel, could be a thing, right? The angry mob that tears down a watchtower with guards stuck up in the watchtower that are half panicked with their crossbows, trying to keep doing their best slash worst and keeping the panicked hordes from trying to get away from those that are part of the pandemic, could also create some kind of hazards as well. Knocking over debris, spilling things, setting fires, letting loose herds of any kind of animals, like letting horses or other mounts out of their stables or something. Like, those are kind of things that could really have an effect on any environment as well. And we've seen like the opening scenes of an apocalypse where normal society starts going crazy, and you follow along behind the shoulders, over the shoulders of like some one or more of the main characters, as people start going crazy, running out of their homes and breaking store windows and things. And that's a lot of stuff. Yeah. Cameron's like, I need to put some brain-eating zombies in a game or two. Oh yeah, there's so many different zombies. Really, if you start looking at some of the details, it's kind of cool. Now, I guess I should have named this zombie pandemic instead of just pandemics in general. But yes, also there's the randomness of mobs as well. Things being thrown randomly towards player characters. Randomly being picked out of the crowd to be tackled, or having things thrown at them, or again, the wild-eyed herd of something stampeding down the streets may be a thing as well. And so you could even make, like, I'll roll a d8 on my random table to see what happens each round, and you roll a random thing. Oh, it's a debris collapse. What can I use for a debris collapse? Let's flip the book open to something random, like, I don't know, a collapsing ceiling trap, and just reskin it, reflavor it, recontextualize it as the bell tower that has been burning, its foundation's been burning and starts to collapse down on everyone. Although the bell tower could be reskinned as the rolling boulder trap as well. But anyway, yeah, like Omen says, using the word pandemic can mean a lot of things. It can even mean constipation or diarrhea pandemic. Yeah, there might be some pretty nasty things exiting out of the rectal region of a lot of people. I don't know how much scatological horrors you can come up with, but yeah, I suppose if you want to start designing some rectal aberrants, I suppose someone could go in and do that. Deadman says there's the TV series iZombie, where the Seattle Emmy medical examiner gets turned into a zombie and has to eat brains regularly, with the side effect of getting the person's memories. I know that show, and I've always wanted to watch that show, but I've never seen it. And I didn't realize that she helped solve crimes by eating people's brains and getting their memories, which is actually kind of a cool thing. To be honest with you, it's a good twist. Although it does it's funny how we take horrible things and turn them into, we romanticize them. We've done that with werewolves and vampires, and I guess it was time to do that with zombies as well. Like, oh yeah, and it's on Netflix. Yep. And it's funny how, like, oh well, we've got to make the zombie a relatable monster as well. So yeah. Ricker's like, thanks. Scatological horror was not something I needed a mental image of during lunch hours. Yeah. Let's see. We could start measuring CR by circumference spreading. It's a CR8 creature. Rip. No. A CR8 monster just came out of my anus. And then you're like, well, would it come out feet first or head first? Would it have to have a burrowing movement speed? I don't know. Um, And maybe we can default to burrowing or swimming speed, depending on how moist it is. I went down the wrong path with that one. It's a dookie ooze, not the dookie ooze. Oh man. Wow. I'm so sorry, guys. Oh shit. Literally. Anyway, getting away from that kind of stuff. Um, Something else that is pretty constipation can be used to ruin people's moods and give will penalties. Yep. Make a roll on hard on a sanity chart. Why? What do you mean? Why? Didn't you see that thing come out of that guy's ass? Like, oh, oh, hey Rocky, watch me do a magic trick. What? Watch me pull a rabbit out of my ass again. It's a cartoon reference. Anyway, I'm old enough to remember those. So there's something else that happens with pandemics as well, and this is kind of nasty, but piles of dead bodies are a thing. There are wild-eyed um, random roving bands of bandits, guards, people who have a militia, self-proclaimed militia groups will be running around, and they may not even be the specific. They may not be the big bad, right? They're just they are the encounter that you have an encounter with as you're trying to do these other things. So like maybe the player characters are looking for a particular magic item or important documents or saving important members of a noble family, or hell, just getting their own family and friends together to save them from this town or what have you, maybe to get them across the walls of the city state to let the place, burn on its own and burn out or whatever. But having piles of dead bodies or pits dug to put the dead bodies in is a thing. And what's a dead what are piles of dead bodies? Well, first of all, there's the danger of getting sick from them. Some of them might have lye or acid spilled on them. They not only, again, does it become like a difficult terrain to cross over, but you could also hide in it or have it fall on top of you, or hide behind it as cover, separating you from whatever enemies are out there, et cetera, et cetera. And if some of those people are still alive, they might be grasping at ankles or grabbing at you, pulling you down, needing to make like those strength challenges, right? Resist the grip of the people who are suffering. I didn't bring that up with mobs of people as well. Even mobs of sick people might be extremely more stronger than you would think, because they are trying to grab onto their last hope. So it might not be a strength versus strength check with them having a strength of 7 or 8. Maybe they have a strength of 12 to 15, because it's like you represent their last hope. And as a group, maybe even as a group or a swarm, maybe they do have a strength of 8, but they get to roll with advantage because there's more of them, like as you would through a help action, right? You can play with the rules and go, okay, well, here's the mechanism. And of course, I'm using 5th edition, right? But whatever mechanism you're using, you go, okay, well, how does the engine work? How would it fit for this? That kind of thing. Deadman says, on the series Misfits on Hulu, I remember the show Misfits, one of the characters got the ability to work magic tricks, and one of his go-to tricks was to pull a rabbit out of his ass. I didn't know that. I know is there a British and an American Misfits? Or is it only a British version? I remember seeing the first couple of episodes of Misfits. There's just too many good shows out there. Now, furthermore, when it comes to pandemics, lots of communities will do things to protect themselves, or things will happen randomly. So, yeah, Misfits was British. Okay, thank you. I didn't know if they had an Americanized version of that. That happens a lot here, right? There was an Americanized version of not humans. Where the ghost, the vampire, and the werewolf live together. Was that Humans? Becoming Human. Mixing them up. Anyway, yeah, yeah, we like to steal this cup. Yep, being humans. That's it, being human, where they room together. Kind of a cool idea though to do that. But the um, places where yeah, thanks Tesla as well. Yeah, I know you guys thought of it before I did, but it just took a little while for it to pop in. Yeah, yeah. The You guys have seen plenty of times where during a pandemic, in any most intellectual properties where people start like barricading themselves into places, or they start like piling up debris to protect themselves, locking doors that normally are not locked, um, heck, setting fire to piles of dead bodies. As a matter of fact, one of the comments left by M. Crowick, whose comments, puts comments in the comment section of YouTube. By the way, as as dangerous a territory to transverse for myself on YouTube, I actually do read all the comments, and mentions the fact that in society, how many times have we taken animals and tried to exterminate a particular type of animal because we felt it was a threat, getting rid of rats or monkeys or any other kind of animals that we feel like are very dangerous, and heck, well, not even just dangerous, but pandemic wise we've known of as dangerous, and set to destroying them, eradicating them. And so there might be piles of those animals, plenty of dead, and a whole bunch of them being wild out there, pissed off that humanity would go and try to, kill them by the hundreds or even the thousands, piling dead bodies up. We've seen that. There's plenty of even photographs of like seals and buffalo and bison and other kinds of animals. And the same goes for rats and birds and bats and things like that people are trying to get rid of. Now, an additional hazard, although this you wouldn't consider this to be an environmental one, is what if there is something that is taking advantage of humanity's unraveling, right? Lots of scavenger animals, those bats and rats and insects and things. Maybe there are even larger predatory animals. And like M. Crowick brought up before, I'm pronouncing it as if it's one word. Crowick even mentions the fact that um in fantasy games, you really can't start killing off all the innocent animals because there's a whole bunch of dangerous ones out there. Maybe those owlbears start like going like, ooh, free eats. They had a hard time eating before, but now they're just running wild. It's like a smorgasbord. It's a buffet. It's a veritable cornucopia of flesh and meat. And so maybe those dangerous things start getting even more dangerous as they start turning rabid, and the owl bears start foaming at the mouth as they start eating the unwittingly eating, infested foods and things, right? Um, yeah. Rick was like, reading YouTube comments? You're a brave man. Make an insanity check. Yeah. I've had to scoop up quite a number of soft serve off the lawn of the YouTube comment section. Yeah, I'm quick to like listen, you get to say whatever you want, but when it gets personal, it's like scoop, scoop, scoop. Yeah, sometimes people leave a big old pile of soft serve over there. Misfits. Thank you there, Wonderboy. Thank you very much there, Dead Man. Um, Heck, I like the Umbrella Academy when it comes to who's. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah, Rickard. Yeah. Like, yeah. You get to say whatever you want, but I have a delete button and a ban hammer. Oh yes. That's like Misfits of Science. Oh, classic 80s. Yep. 80s. Yep. 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 Mm-mm-mm. Misfits of Science. Man, that's old. That brings back such memories. Okay, um, getting the squirrel out the way. Squirrels moves aside. The other thing with using the environment with pandemics, of course, we have to have the player characters engage in some sort of like we need to find the cure or find the thing that will help alleviate the other thing, and that could be in fantasy, that could be anything from, of course, delving down into basements or moving through wild locations in the outer reaches of your setting, and so of course you get to play with like, oh, there's an herb that can alleviate this, and all you have to do is get the herb, and the player character's like, great, okay, where's the herb? Well, it only grows in the midway point of a I don't know, 1,000-foot cliff, and you got to climb up and or down that cliff, and it's like, of course, it's somewhere where we can't get to. Yeah, it's at the bottom of the ocean, or this turbulent, raging river. You just have to swim down to the bottom of it, or whatever the case may be, right? It might be somewhere out in the wild. Now, the other thing is, it might be trapped behind enemy lines. Whether those enemy lines are literally like armies or militia that have been set up to protect themselves, or abandoned city state that's dangerous to go inside of because it's ravaged by people running randomly, plus rage zombies of people that have been infected, plus a flaming cart that's standing in front of the doorway that you normally had the key to get into, but now you got to figure out, everyone's got to work together to put the fire out or move the cart away from to get into the deep basement. And if you go into the basement, there's only one way out, and there might be people who might follow you down into it. And like most, if using the zombie apocalypse motif, wherever the protagonists go, the zombies are sure to follow if they see you or hear you or sense you. So you got to worry about that as well. So dungeon delving might not be a matter of, hey, let's go to room 1, 2, or 3. It might be, hey, we need to hurry up and get through room 1, 2, and 3 because we've got a whole horde of something coming behind us. And that's where we get to use what I love is escalation, right? Killing 1 or 2 zombies, no big deal. But making enough noise to summon 5 zombies, and then 15, and then 37, and then 68, and then 152, and then 205. And, after a certain period of time, despite maybe even using the minion rules, despite doing that, yeah, you could still, there's still a way for the player characters to still be trapped where they are. They can't move through the crowd. And of course, as in the zombie pandemic, they never tire, they never sleep, they don't stop, right? Ricker says, wish me luck. I'm going to try out my homemade wax seals now. Back in 5. We'll still have the audio. Okay, okay. Not a big deal. All right. We will still be here. Now that we've gotten to the halfway point, I will talk about part of my philosophy when it comes to using the third pillar. Very quickly, using the third pillar basically means that much like combat, you have close quarters combat, melee combat, striking people with swords, or using grappling or martial arts, or axes and shields, and you have ranged combat, throwing things like javelins, firing crossbows or something. In social interactions, we have intimidation or persuasion or performance abilities, carousing, seduction, intimidation, interrogation. But when it comes to the third pillar, we often don't have a lot of descriptors. So I've made my own, such as like static environments, static, escalating, random, stimulated, or like if-then environments, random environments, and of course stackable environments where you start combining one or more of the following. And in a pandemic style setting, if you want to make it really dynamic, but you're not really used to using it, start off with something that is static, right? Because static environments, while boring, much like, I don't know, difficult terrain for me, is easy to do, and it's easy for the player characters to understand it, right? So anything like fog, darkness, difficult terrain, something hard to transverse through. Even harmful environments can be static, right? A burning building. Okay, outside the burning building, you suffer no fire damage. When you walk into the burning building, it's so hot and burning that if you go inside of it or cross the burning wall or something, you will suffer X amount of damage, and that's pretty standard, and it's very static. It's either you're suffering something from it or you're not. With when it comes to like an escalating hazard, escalating hazards are great because you can really get the player characters to have to make a hard decision as to what they want to do. So, for example, they need to escape the city state, and they know there's like the zombie. I know. Going back to the zombies again. Okay, the infected are running around below them, along with angry mobs or scared mobs of people that are running for their lives. And the player characters are like, okay, we're going to cross the rooftops, and maybe there's burning buildings and rooftops. So, an escalation could be standing on a burning building means that there's a greater chance every round. Not only will you get burned, but you'll fall through the roof, right? So you stand on it the first round and you take 1d6 fire damage. All right, no big deal. I've got a lot of hit points. I can suffer this. Okay, well, next round you're going to take 2d6. Next round 3d6. And then at some point you're like, okay, when it hits like 5d6 damage, the ceiling collapses, right? You describe it in a manner that lets them foreshadows the event happening, right? That's kind of an escalating event. Another escalating event is, well, getting triangulated and getting trapped, okay? Running away from the pandemic mob. I'm going to make a dash action and run away from them. Great, okay. Make some kind of navigation check, which would be, I guess you could default that down to either survival or like investigation rather than say always defaulting to perception. Like, okay, I'm going to pick the proper direction to choose so I don't get trapped in there. But maybe some player characters are like, oh, I'm going to move slowly. Well, sure, you move slowly and you might not be detected, but the longer you stay in, the greater chance you have of being cornered and not being able to escape, right? And so an escalating encounter is one where you give the option that speed is of the essence, but it's far more dangerous to do that. Whereas moving slowly protects you now, but the escalation might mean that you might not be able to get out of it later, right? It's either get out of it now and suffer the harm, or wait a little bit and try to avoid the harm before it really stacks up later, right? That's basically it. It's like us normal human beings. Like three criminals are trying to corner you in an alleyway. Do I run from the criminals and hope to fight off them one at a time? Or do I try to hide from the criminals knowing that all three of them are looking for me, but then when they find me, all three of them are going to jump me, right? It's basically that kind of thing. And then there's, of course, stimulated environments. And stimulated or if-then environments literally means like if-then. Like if you do this zombie pandemic, if you make noise, then they will hear you. Pretty simple, right? If I stomp across the burning building, then there's a good chance the roof will collapse. Those are the kind of things that are like if then encounters. And when you're talking about the environment, it could be maybe there's something that could crumble or topple over, or you can send spilling forward. Like I'm in a warehouse and I want to find the high ground. I'm going to climb up the stacked pallets of goods and things. Okay, well, a lot of it was knocked over as the DM, and you're like, okay, well, if you climb up it, there's a good chance you may knock some of it down and they'll hear you. Great. Okay, well, I'm going to try to climb up it anyway. All right, well, you don't really need to make an athletics check to climb, but you're gonna have to make a stealth check, but it's gonna be a disadvantage. Oh, nasty, but all right, I'll do it. You give the players the option, like, well, if you do this thing, then this thing will happen. Do you still want to do it? There's also random events, and random basically means like being randomly targeted, or random things may happen in and around the environment, much like a chase. A classic chase is running through town or running out in the wilderness or something, and random things could be happening. Randomly struck by lightning from like a chaos storm is the kind of thing. Randomly having random debris fall out of the sky. In a pandemic, the randomization might be randomly coming across a panicked family that wants your help, and that panicked family might be screaming out for you to save them, and you're sitting there going like, shh, shut up, shh, quiet, shut up, and they're screaming like, oh, help me, the gods help me, or something, right? Maybe that's the random encounter. Maybe the next random encounter are a pack of rabid wild dogs, and maybe the next random encounter might be a blocked roadway with those burning wagons we were talking about before. Another random encounter could be armed guards who are half trying to do their job, half trying to save themselves, anything like that. So random encounters, and remember, a random encounter doesn't mean random monsters or random combat. It means a random encounter. So that encounter doesn't necessarily need to be something where you're rolling dice and initiative. It could just be something in your way, or something you found, or you ran across important documents, and it's like, do I stop to pick up the documents, or do I stop to read the thing or move the thing? And again, for me, using and abusing the environment I love that idea. Player characters say, hey, can I move the wagon in our way, turn it over, and light it on fire and make a barrier? The hell you can. Of course you can, right? Well, why not? Didn't think about that, but all right, let it happen. That's where we come across this idea of create situations, create problems, but don't create solutions to those problems. That's something that was spoken very eloquently by the people over at Tabletop Terrors and Absolute Tabletop. And I've used that plenty of times. Just create the problems. Don't create the solutions. If the players are very creative in solving the problem, great. Give them the slow clap. Give them the slow clap and let them do it, and then move on. You will never run out of environment, because wherever you are, that's where it's at, right? The environment is where you're standing, whether you're standing in a dark forest or mountain peaks or desolate desert or a ravaged city state. Wherever you are, that's where the environment is. You're not going to run out of it. If they solve one of your problems, no problem. Just move on. Okay, great. You solved it. Great. Let's keep going. Rick's like, proof of concept work. Now I just need to make a better version that doesn't stick to the wax. I think somebody is having fun, calmly listening to the show and or engaging in their own projects, which is actually kind of cool. Maybe I should advertise the channel that way, right? Hey, too much iron in your diet? Listen to the show. You'll get smooth soft serve after that. 5 out of 4 doctors recommend listening to RPG with DBJ. Yeah, it hasn't been approved by the FDA, by the way, guys. Now, lastly, when I talk about using the third pillar of exploration, one of the main things when it comes to exploration is rewarding the players for exploring your environment. Yes, I am an experimental drug. As a matter of fact, open up a vein and dump me on in there. Oh yeah. Oh man, people tweaking on the show. They're like, more show, more RPG material. Anyway, there could be things that the player characters can find in the environment that helps them, do what they want. The best way I can say of describing this, and please try to follow me on this, much like rewarding players with gold pieces and magic items, or maybe even like boons of some sort, is that the environment itself becomes the reward and the gift that they can use for something later. So what I mean is that Um, if the player characters use the environment to, like I said, turn over a wagon, light it on fire, and it blocks a roadway, that becomes their cover. Maybe you describe the wagon as like maybe a very low wall of fire or something that they created haphazardly. The barbarian picks up a giant table and uses it to keep the zombies, out of the door, and they pick it up and they push it towards the horde of zombies that are coming down the hallway or whatever, and use the table to block it. Do you go, well, it only does 1d4 damage because it's an improvised weapon, or do you go, man, that's a really great idea, and you picked up a big ass table there, 18 strength barbarian, I'm going to give that to you, right? Do you reward them for doing the thing that does the thing? And because it's tied to the environment, don't be scared to grant bonuses and other kinds of enhancements to the players because they can't take it with them. It's tied to the environment. The player character that cuts the rope on the bell in the bell tower to have it fall down and crush their enemies, maybe you give them a bunch of dice, grab some random dice. Here, grab a 5d10 and make a roll, and if you're successful, you get to do 5d10 bludgeoning damage or something, right? Sure, the bard didn't have that ability before, but maybe by utilizing the environment, you've given them that bonus, and as opposed to handing out another magic sword or another potion, the environment becomes the reward for doing the thing. Cameron's like, yeah, with YouTube, you basically mainline D&D through your earlobes. Yes? Oh, yes. Listen to my dulcet tones as I invade your ear hole. Oh, yeah. Maybe, I could do the show as the ASMR. I could do it like in really like get really close to the microphone and just speak dulcetly into your ear, lulling you into sleep. So the last thing I will say about using the third pillar environment is that it's kind of an atrophied muscle, and I'll wait. You go get yourself an absorbent towelette. I'll wait. Anyway, if as a atrophied muscle, sometimes we can feel like throwing too much of the environment in throws a monkey wrench into what we're thinking of, right? Hey, player characters are running across the town and it's like burning buildings and they're trying to escape. And maybe as the game master, dungeon master, you're like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. So that chaos can be a little bit scary. And and there is this thing where the unknown can be quite a scary concept, right? Where I'm going to throw mobs of people and burning buildings and piles of debris and spilled barrels of acid and rabid dogs all in this big giant city state. I don't know how it's going to turn. Yeah, I don't know how it's going to turn out, and it can be scary. But I think since you as the dungeon master are in control of what you're adding to it, don't be too afraid to use it. And like I said, add some static elements in there. Maybe do it once or twice. Most of the environment is far less complicated than your basic stat block of a creature, right? Fire, smoke, go back to that difficult terrain, slippery locations. Hey, you want a barrel of acid? Go find a stat block to one of your favorite oozes. Take away all the creature start parts of it, and just go, hey, you get pushed in the acid. It's like a black pudding, or a gelatinous cube or something, and just use the creature part of that element and just leave it at that. Uh, Tesla Ranger puts in a very strange segue here, but the Smurfs started out as a Belgian comic book, and in the first issue, the Black Smurfs, a Smurf is infected by a disease that turns him jet black, violent, and unable to speak. He then spreads the disease by biting other Smurfs. And Papa Smurf always says, Brady? Anyway, and the few other remaining normal Smurfs have to find a cure. This story, despite having nearly every element of the modern zombie apocalypse, predated Night of the Living Dead by 9 years. Wow, the Smurfs that Smurf. I did not know that. That is, wow. I didn't know that. Yeah, Deadman says the SoundCloud link would be maintaining the show through your ear holes. Although I haven't updated the SoundCloud account in quite a while, just because it takes a while and it takes time and effort to do it, and I haven't done it, and I need to do that. Because I haven't. You notice I haven't been pushing the SoundCloud because I don't want people to go over there and go, well, there's nothing recent over here. Although if you're brand new, I guess everything's recent. So. Yeah, Rickard shows us what he's working on. You can see the shield shapes, and I see at least 2 of them. That's kind of cool. Now, lastly, I will say that especially in a pandemic kind of environment, if you want to have things shift and change around the player characters, it can be very easy to go very gonzo with this kind of thing, right? Like every round there's something brand new. That might be a little bit too much, but what I would do is pick some highlights. Like you don't necessarily need to have a random encounter table, right? I know there's something weird and like there's like the anti-random encounter thing going on in Dungeons and Dragons that random encounters suck, but I think it's a psychological problem more than anything. If you already make up your mind that random encounter tables suck, there's nothing that anyone can do about them. But if you make up your own random encounter tables and leave the danger into the player's hands, like, hey, roll a d10. What, you rolled a 10? Oh well, let me check my table. Since I wrote it down, blah 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 happens. It's okay to have those kind of things. My thing is that like while I love magic and the arcane, and it can be very easy to default to the magic of something and explain everything away with, well, it's just magic. There are a host of very simple real life, when I say real life, like mundane, non-arcane things that happen, like weather events and things that are very world changing. They're powerful. They are, and you can't cancel them out with a simple magic spell. You can't just avoid them by, snapping your fingers with some kind of magical effect, right? Much like we talk about like blizzards and hurricanes and things, earthquakes and exploding volcanoes. Short of like 7th, 8th, 9th level spell casting levels, there's not really much you could do about it other than weather the storm of whatever's happening. And so the same thing can be done in a pandemic. Like, for example, something classic that happens in like rage zombie pandemic kind of things are the absolute mob of people that reach through something to grab at the player characters. When they reach through fencing or gates or cyclone fencing or something. Maybe the hazard is just not getting your clothes snatched and getting held against the wall while rabid dogs start chewing on the legs of the PCs, right? Maybe it's just a matter of needing to make sure they don't get sick when the pus-filled people who want to have their lives saved bump up against the player characters, and they don't want to get the crap on their armor or their clothing and possibly get infected. So they have to wear something across their mouth, or they have to hurry up and use alcohol or oil or, I don't know, horse urine or something to wash the crap off of their skin before it infects them or invades their body or something. Which, by the way, that becomes its own problem. When the cleric is like, oh, I've got plenty of spell slots for remove disease, and you're like, yeah, but do you have the time to do it? Because as the dungeon master, I might start, you know, using that escalation part of the third pillar of exploration when you're being hunted by the zombie apocalypse. You don't really have time to sit down and do the lay on hands, maybe, right? Rickard says the problem with the random encounter table is that it's not as well balanced or as thematic as a handcrafted encounter. I am going to disagree with you sideways with that. The first part of your comment there, Rickard says the problem with the random encounter table is that it's not well balanced. And I would say that that's from the OSR community, that's the point, right? Like you can encounter 3 goblins or you can encounter a red dragon, right? And since it's not balanced, the player characters themselves need to learn the skill of, oh, I don't know, running, talking, not thinking that everything they can encounter they can fight. But the second part of your comment that I do agree with is, or you say that the problem with the random encounter is not as well balanced, which I think balance is a encounter balance is only as good as the manner in which you meaning me, us dungeon masters and game masters, um, interact and allow the players to be creative, right? If you don't fight the red dragon and they're 3rd level, maybe they can talk to the red dragon. And if you don't allow that, then you're not allowing there to be like a motivational balance. But the second part of that is, he says, or as thematic as a handcrafted encounter. My thing is, if you're going to do a random encounter table anyway, you should already be making it thematic, right? If you take a random encounter table and you put it in the desert, then there should be like desert nomads and maybe giant scorpions and sidewinder snakes and maybe a sphinx or a sphinx or a phoenix or something like that, right? Whereas that red dragon, maybe you're like, red dragon doesn't fit in the desert, maybe a blue dragon, right? It's making it thematic so that no matter what you roll on a random table, it's already going to be thematic, you know? Ricker says, I would argue that a handcrafted encounter can teach all those things only better. Sure. So now, mind you, there's some people who would argue that they argue with the idea of the quantum ogre problem, right? Player characters decide to go left or right, and no matter which direction you choose, they're going to encounter an ogre. And so some players can see through that, and it bothers them. I have no problem with the quantum ogre issue if I'm allowed to interact with that encounter in the manner in which I decide. Because quantum ogering is different than railroading, right? But yeah. And Rickard says, yeah, but a handcrafted desert one might have environmental effects in play, and caves you can hide in to avoid some of the environment and such. Right. I mean, yeah, exactly. Well, as long as you insert that into your maybe you allow them, if a player's like, we don't want to fight a blue dragon, we're 3rd level. Is there a place to hide? And you go, yeah, it makes sense. Make a survival check. Or you just go, yeah, I didn't want a blue dragon to show up anyway, but I did want them to know there is one here. So yeah, there's a place to hide. Are you going to go there? And they're like, hell's yes. It's those kind of things. So if you my feeling is that if you psychologically put yourself into random table, I roll, this sucks, then of course that's exactly how you're going to feel. It's the same thing like eating a meal or going on vacation or something. If you already think it's going to suck, there's not much you can do to change that. But if you say, let me roll in this table and come up with a great idea, whether you are randomly rolling 3 weeks earlier for your content or you're rolling immediately, if you embrace the die roll, those 3 goblins or that blue dragon, maybe the story changes and you're like, yeah, this is a great story I can tell. So, yep. Yeah, I hear you. Rickard's like doubles down, like, yeah, basically my opinion is that everything a random encounter table can do, a handcrafted encounter can do better. Sure, you get a chance to think about it. I I like the chaos because I like to be surprised. I don't default to random tables at all, but every once in a while, sometimes you might get stuck with something like, I don't know what's going to happen next, and so that might be a great way to do it, especially if your players make a left turn instead of a right, and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen next, and they decide to go to the desert instead of the jungle, and I had all these jungle encounters. Then you can either quantum ogre it maybe or something. Yeah, like I said, rolling on a random table 3 weeks before the game starts or 30 seconds before the event happens, it's the same thing, except that there are some players that can see through it, and you gotta, those players that see through it, here, player advice. Don't point that out. Don't be an asshole and point that stuff out, right? Don't fold your arms like, you didn't have anything prepared. This is stupid. Like, don't do that. Cameron says, my current way of thinking about random encounters is that they should be able to be dealt with without violence and provide a slice of each pillar of play. But of course, violence is always an option because the players can always make it that way. Yeah, they've got pointy things. They want to poke things with it, right? Although that could be taken badly. But anyway, guys, hell, man, we should talk about that for a whole week. Maybe not. I don't know. I might think about that. Yep. Yeah, Rickard's like, yeah, they're players. Yeah, they're players. It's let's face it, there will be violence. So we're going to go out on that point. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section, and like, share, subscribe, follow, spread the word of the channel if you would like to. It is not just me as a talking head, but the rest of you who are the brilliant people who make the show possible. So thank you very much. Tomorrow is Future Friday, and so for those who are interested in like science fiction, especially when it deals with like transhumanism and transhuman issues, please show up for that for Future Friday. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for taking part in the show. I thank you kindly, and of course, everyone have a great day. Be careful, be safe. Have a great one, all of you. Thank you for watching. I will see you later.